Welcome to the Nonsense in the Chaos. I'm your host, Jaylee Rose, and today we are talking about sovereignty. Sovereignty is a word that meant very little to me until I think probably the pilgrimages were the beginning of my exploration into what sovereignty means to me. And it began with meeting Jonathan Kay, who I've interviewed in the podcast. If you want to go back and listen to him, he's an extraordinary man. My master, my teacher, who taught me fooling for many years. We met at the bottom of St Catherine's Hill in Winchester. Jonathan lived in Winchester for many years. He now resides outside of Glastonbury, but he lived in Winchester for a long time, and he set up the Hat Fair, the longest running street arts festival in the UK. I'm not sure of how old it is compared to other ones in the world, but it's definitely the oldest one in the UK. And he knows Winchester well. I knew that he knew it well, but I hadn't been aware of how intimately he knew it until he met me on the pilgrimage. And it was the second pilgrimage I walked. So the first one I walked on my own, which was horizontal across the land from Cornwall to the Norfolk coast to Hopton-on-Sea. This was along the Michael and Mary energy lines known as the St Michael Ley Line. And then the second year I walked with Listening to the Land Pilgrimage for Nature from the Isle of Wight to Winchester, then got the train over to London, picked up the other pilgrims, and we got the train out of London. We walked from Henley to Edinburgh and then got a bus over to Glasgow where COP26 was happening. A few of us took a holiday van to Hope Bay at the top of Scotland and finished the line at the Crown Chakra at the top. We worked out where we felt the chakra points were along the spine and held ceremonies along that spine. The ley line was called the Spine of Albion. The vertical line is called the Spine of Albion, and the two energy lines are called Ellen and Belinus. They're the masculine and feminine lines. It was myself and Scarlett, who's my dear friend. We set off from the Isle of Wight and walked up to Winchester to start the line. The reason why it wasn't all of the pilgrims was because I didn't know about the ley line when I first put the call out to the world. I said, who wants to walk to COP26? We're going to walk from London to Glasgow. And people said yes. And I was looking for a route. And that's when I found out about the Spine of Albion. Having walked a ley line, these two energy lines previously, I'll explain again briefly. I've explained this before in previous podcasts, but if you're new and you're listening today, a ley line, which probably more of you have heard of, is a straight line drawn with a ruler through sacred sites. This is called a ley line. You take dowsing rods you use in the field, and you go dowsing to see if you can find what energy lines are there. You find the energy lines that run, it might be one or two, using dowsing rods around this ley line. And both the Michael ley line and the Spine of Albion ley line, it was discovered that there were two energy lines interweaving and crossing over at the sacred sites that were called node points. Energy lines aren't fixed. They move, they grow in width. They're likened to the energy lines in the body. So they can get blocked and they can be free-flowing and they can be changed and moved. They're energetic lines. What are they? We don't know. It could be the magnetic field running around the Earth. There are different theories about it. There's a whole podcast you can listen to if you want to learn more. But the Spine of Albion was a line I found out about, and we had the root chakra in the Isle of Wight, and we did the root chakra ceremony there at the Devil's, I think it's the Devil's Punch Bowl in the Isle of Wight, and then walked from there to Winchester. I did say, does anyone want to join me? But the pilgrims all met me in London. I'd said, let's start in London. Scarlett joined me for the beginning bit. And Winchester was the sacral chakra point, the one just under your belly button. Jonathan met us at the bottom of St Catherine's Hill and told us that the area we were standing in, which again, if you go back and listen to his podcast, you'll hear more about this. The whole area was a land temple. It actually goes all the way to Boomtown, to where the basin is. This landscape is vast, and it's this great big land temple. It would have already been naturally shaped. There was the Downs, the end of the South Downs. There is this rippled shape where the glaciers jutted up from the earth. But you can see that they've been worked with, slightly manipulated by man. They look man-made, but they were using the foundations of something that was already there naturally. They've sculpted this giant, vast land temple. And Boomtown is in part of it, Boomtown Festival. And another part of it is St Catherine's Hill, which he told us was originally known as the King's Hill, was where he was saying that there were pendragons for each area of the UK. So you had the Cornish pendragon, the East Anglia pendragon, the Scottish pendragon, the Welsh pendragon, and the Northern pendragon. And we had all these different pendragons that would do this continual journey back to their lands. And then at the right time of year for wherever they were situated, they would set off and process across the land to meet all together on King's Hill at midsummer. So at high summer, the Pendragon Kings from across the land would meet at King's Hill and march up the hill and arrive at the top, and they would meet and discuss the land, the ruling of the land, make bargains, agreements, and decide on important matters. If someone had something that they wanted to come and petition the king for, they would come forth up the hill. Whoever was the right person to answer their query would sit in the throne as the High King. Individually, people would come up and speak to the High King, and they didn't know that each time they were speaking to someone different, or maybe they did know, but it didn't matter who they were speaking to, because whoever they spoke to was the High King, but that High King was whoever was the right Pendragon to answer that query, to answer that problem. And that was just wonderful. I loved that story. I loved that idea of leadership and that way of leading. Then he said to me and Scarlett, he said, as we now ascend this hill, as you're walking up, contemplate your sovereignty and what is sovereign within you and what that means to you. I'd never thought about it before. As I started walking up the hill, it made me think back to an experience I had with an amazing lady called Charlotte Pulver, who I will see if I can interview one day on this podcast. It'd be wonderful to get her on. And she still leads pilgrimages through London, walking what she calls the Sovereign Line. That's the old coronation route through the city of London. She introduces London in a completely new way as a land temple. She talks about how there were lots of islands. If you've ever read London Rivers, that story about all the London rivers, London was a series of rivers and was a sacred land, mainly underwater, with these like islands of hills, which is the same landscape as Avalon, Glastonbury, where it's all these little islands, and it would have all been underwater because it's tidal, isn't it, the Thames? So possibly would have been underwater, and then, which I think is the same for Glastonbury as well. They found loads of relics of offerings and such like in and around London. They found in the foundations of St Paul's that there were loads of artifact like horns to Artemis. So it was, Artemis was one hill. There was a temple to Artemis with loads of deer skulls there. Apollo, her twin brother, who's the sun god, was another hill. The pilgrimage that she leads starts by Tower Hill, and she talks about the raven, and the reason the ravens never leave the Tower of London is because the Tower of London was built on what was already a sacred site that was Bran's Hill. And Bran was the king of England, and he's the king that is linked to the Welsh myth. I can't remember how it goes, but it's to do with her getting married and building a bridge with Wales. I can't remember the myth. He's this special important king of old, and when he died, his head was buried in Tower Hill to protect the land. He was there to keep watch, and his totem animal was the raven. If the ravens leave Tower Hill, it's because the land is going to fall. It's Bram's no longer able to do his job. So the ravens are there protecting Tower Hill because of Bram being there. And that hill was chalk, And so it was this white hill, like they do with the chalk men and horses we pass on our pilgrimages. The hill was scalped, so it glowed. So it was this glowing white hill, this sacred hill, and that's where the Tower of London was built. And she'd talked about the London Stone, where when you entered London, you hit your sword on the stone and declared who you were. And we all went to the London Stone, which is built into the wall of one of the banks, near Bank in London. And we declared ourselves who we were and what we stood for at this stone. And it was such a powerful journey that it was incorporated into the beginning of this pilgrimage to COP26. After I'd met with Jonathan, we were going over to London and walk this sovereign line to then make our journey to COP26. It was a way of connecting in with the land. When Jonathan said to consider our sovereignty as we walked up the hill, it occurred to me that what we were doing in London is we were connecting to our sovereignty. What we were taking with us up to COP26 was our right as individuals to say that how the land is treated is important. Something I'd learnt through Jonathan was working on a play called Richard II, done by this guy called Shakespeare. Don't know if you heard of him. No, it's played Richard II by Shakespeare. We spent nearly 3 years learning all the lines to the whole of Richard II, which is an extremely foolish thing to do. And it was a foolish way of making Shakespeare that is Jonathan's way of making Shakespeare, where we all learnt the whole play. Instead of having set characters, we had shapes. The person playing Richard would have someone with their hands behind their head making a crown shape above their head, and other people would be making a throne, and if Richard went to sit down, we'd make a throne around him and become a throne. Depending on our dispositions, different ones of us would speak certain lines, and we'd keep swapping. It was a very animated, almost filmic rendition, but using just our bodies. We had no props and very simple costumes. People who saw it said it was like reading a book because they can remember rain and wind and smoke and jousting, and they remember armour and flags, but it was us doing all of that with our bodies. We were making the shapes with our bodies and doing cutaways, like we'd go to one scene and we'd be all a shape doing something and then we cut away. We were at the bottom of the battlement on horses talking up to Richard II as Bolingbroke, and then we just turn around and be Richard on the battlements with people making the shape of the castle, looking down at Bolingbroke talking. It was pretty amazing. It took a long time for it to get amazing. It was just a mess for ages. And we finally got it to a point that was stunning, and about 20 people saw it, and then we all fell out with each other, and that was the end of that. And that was with Joanne Chamarko, who I've interviewed on the podcast. She was in that with me. Richard II is the play of sovereignty. The core part of it is the lines, "Not I, nor any man that but man is, with nothing shall be pleased, till he be eased with being nothing." Richard speaks these lines when he's in the prison and he's lost his title of king. He's lost everything. It's who is he? And he's reaching this sort of Zen state. I'm not my labels. I'm not my job title, but I am something still. There is still this thing here. And that thing is, it's the thing that's infinite in us, and it's the highest thing in us, and it is our sovereignty. And that's not about an outer grabby thing. Oh, but I'm the CEO of a bank, or I'm the man of the house, or I'm the mother, or I'm in charge somehow because I've achieved these things and got these labels. That's all really outer world and grabby, and if you lose them, then you'll fall apart and have a nervous breakdown because you've invested so much in these trinkets that aren't really what your sovereignty are. And your true sovereignty is the Emperor card, which is the card of Aries, which is the season that we're now in. The Emperor card is about your sovereignty, and that sovereignty is the Emperor sitting in his throne with his legs crossed, and he's relaxed, calm, and he just knows he's in charge, but he's also not a tyrant. So he's what Charlotte introduced us to in her pilgrimage was sovereignty. It's not about telling people what to do and being a tyrant. It's about serving. Richard II is about that because he's becoming a tyrant. He becomes a tyrant. He just thinks he's ordained by God so he can do whatever he wants. And so he gets usurped. And through usurpation, he's then ripped to pieces until he's nothing. That's when he finds enlightenment before he dies. It's reflected in the land. He's so connected to the land. He's seeing it as the land's ordained him to be king, so therefore he can do whatever he wants and he's just in charge. But as he crumbles and loses his land, he realises that it's the body politic, the idea that if the king, which is the head, is sick, then the whole body is sick. If you're going to be the leader, the sovereign, then your health, your being of service to the whole body, you're only healthy if the whole body is healthy. You need to look after the whole body. And that's so key with what's going on in the world at the moment. If you're not looking after the land and the animals, then you're not looking after all your limbs. You're not looking after your fingers, your toes. You're not looking after your bowels. You're going to get cancer and you're going to get tumours and you're going to get ill and die. You're going to have a heart attack. Your arteries will clog. And that's what you can see is happening, because our leaders are forgetting that they're actually here to serve us and not to rule us and be tyrants. And it's interesting because Aries represents the head, and the head is the crown, and this is the place of beginning. Aries is the beginning of the zodiac wheel of the year. Most of us, we're born with our crown pushing out. It's our crown that comes through first into the world. And this is the beginning of the year and us moving into the world. We have to look after our whole bodies for our minds to have a healthy body to live in. So it can't just be all head. And that's what happened on Tower Hill. We chopped off all the heads of the religious leaders and then had the Enlightenment. And that's how the Enlightenment began, with this great purge of spiritual leaders. They were corrupt. There were reasons why that happened, but that led to us being completely outer worldy for the last 500 odd years, where we became disembodied. We disembodied ourselves. We have just been head and we've been ignoring the body. And the result of that is a very disembodied rulership and sovereignty in the world. And yeah, the repercussions of that is that our rivers are dirty and our bloodstreams are dirty, our water is dirty, we've got rubbish dumps everywhere, the seas are full of plastic. All of the things that we're doing to the earth is a symptom of ignoring the body politic. And we need to make sure we're not doing that in ourselves. It is all about the micro and the macro. This is really coming up for me a lot at the moment, of how to make sure that you're doing your bit in your pixel. Because if you do, then that does affect the bigger picture. So how are you being of service? How are you sitting in your sovereignty? Are you connecting to your higher self? It's not about the outer world stuff. That's not the sovereign part of you. The sovereign part of you is the archetypal higher self part of you. That's the infinite part of you that is your twin. And the twin is what we work with in Fooling. And this is the bit that dreams and imagines and creates and is spontaneous and is free and unlimited and connected to all living things and all things, the whole universe. It's pure awareness. When I work with the Which Fool Are You course, this is what we're working with. We're connecting to this part of ourselves. Fooling, the fool is this part of us. It's the infinite part of us. In flamenco dancing, it's the duende. The duende is the spirit of flamenco. When you get possessed by the spirit of flamenco, you are lost in duende. I love that word. That is what we're working with, all of these things, with Fooling and with the Which Fool Are You and flamenco. It's this duende, this spirit we connect to that is infinite. And that's the bit where physics stops existing, feels like you're in the Matrix, able to dodge the bullet and jump between roofs, and everything's just in flow and you're free and you're limitless, and it's a wonderful place to be. And that is where our sovereignty is. That's what our real sovereignty is. And when we're in that place, we're not trying to prove anything. We're just comfortably powerful and in our power. And back down the spine of Albion, we worked with this energy. It was interesting because when we went up towards COP26, it felt like it was very much about Ellen and the Ellen line, because we were confronted by a really shocking beginning of the pilgrimage, which was in the Isle of Wight. This is a bit of a trigger warning, but it's to do with an attack on a young girl in a forest, which was very horrible. It was a sexual violent attack in a forest in the Isle of Wight. She was a young girl and she was drawing a drawing of Artemis in her sketchbook in the forest, and she was drawn to this place, this glade. It's a beautiful place. It feels absolutely buzzing. The Ellen line runs right through it. Ellen is the goddess of the ways, like the ways that the animals make when they walk and migrate and make their paths. And humans then follow because they know the animals are there and they're hunting, and then they become paths, and then that's how our roads are made and formed, and these kind of natural ways that develop through us walking and travelling the land. And she looks like Artemis. She's like the English Celtic version of Artemis. She has the horns, and she's the horned goddess of the Celtic faiths, and Belenus is the sun god of the Celtic faith. So it is a bit like Artemis and Apollo. It's Ellen and Belenus. Because this girl had been drawing Artemis in the glade when she was then assaulted and murdered, in her honour, the drawing she had of Artemis was carved into a tree trunk. So there's this beautiful sculpture of Artemis in this glade. That for us was just such a shocking start to this walk, where we're walking up the land to COP26 to petition our world leaders to stop doing this to the Mother Earth. It's this treatment of the feminine, those weaker than us, the land, the animals, the poor. If you treat them like this, then we'll all be sick. And this is causing everybody's sickness. Yes, you're the head, but this sickness is creeping up and it's going to get you and it's on its way. We need to be responsible for the whole thing. This was right at the root chakra, and it was really full on to experience that at the beginning of the pilgrimage. It definitely felt like that pilgrimage was more focused on the Ellen line. We walked up this line and it was the wounded feminine and the earth and the trauma of it all, walking that up to COP26 and up to the world leaders, and then up to the crown chakra to Hope Bay. And we finished that pilgrimage and the earth clapped us 7 claps of thunder, and we'd done the 7 chakra points. That was mad. There was no lightning or rain. We just had 7 claps of thunder out of nowhere and a double rainbow. So that was incredible. But on the way back down, 2 years later, we did the pilgrimage back down the Spine of Albion, starting in Edinburgh and walking down to the Isle of Wight. And that was very much more focused on the Belenus energy. And something we'd picked up on the way up was that Belenus felt to us like King Arthur. There were lots of references to King Arthur along the route. There were 2 round tables. There's caves in Alderley Edge where there's knights sleeping, and when the land's in need, these knights are meant to rise again and rescue the land. There were loads of places where Taliesin or Merlin had encounters and things had happened. I think there was a place where he was meant to have been killed. And then, lots of references to King Arthur. There was this sovereign, and also the King's Hill in Winchester. So there was this sovereign connection along this route. When we came back down, we'd workshop a play. We'd ensemble developed a play about King Arthur. So our own Mama's play. Mama's plays are normally traditional. It's a traditional old play of like George and the Dragon. There's a Christmassy one as well with Santa Claus, St. Nicholas, Father Christmas in it. Basically, they're set plays, and that's what most people will do. So if you're doing a mummer's play, that's what you'll be doing. I've been doing mumming since I was 10, and I've been making up my own mummer's plays for years. We work at Kentwell Hall Tudor Reenactment, and we get bored of doing the same play all the time, and people get bored of watching the same play all the time. So we've written our own plays for years. I'm used to doing that, but I really like it as well because we're using these archetypes. We're working with archetype, and we're working with this collective consciousness soup that is the dreaming, that is the inner world where the archetypes reside, and we're pulling things from this soup and making stories and narratives with them. And the thing is with folk stories, they never make any sense because they're from an older time where Aristotle story structure of the hero's adventure isn't ingrained in Western culture. There's lots of different types of storytelling happening. Often it was oral, so it could have all sorts of weird things added in that don't make any sense. A bit more like Studio Ghibli. Studio Ghibli storytelling is from a different tradition. It's got a very different narrative structure to it, and so do folk tales. And it gives space for metaphor and dreaming and imagination, and for you to fill in the gaps, for the audience to watch and it not be really clear what's going on, but they're just getting a vibe, and it's up to them to connect with what this thing is. It worked at my wedding last year with Dizzle. At the end, oh god, it was so funny, on the Sunday night, so we'd done the festival and the wedding on the Saturday, and then on the Sunday we had the meals. The wedding ended up being over 2 days, and we had the meal on the Sunday, and by Sunday night we were broken. I'd put on a whole festival. I was an absolute stain in my wedding dress, dressed as Merlin with a beard and long grey hair. We ended up doing this King Arthur Mummers play that we'd created at the wedding, and everyone was like, what is this? And I hadn't even thought about the lines or anything since we'd done it the year before, and we performed it. One of the local guys here, who was the chef, he's a Carling drinking local guy who would never go watch something like this normally. He's from Manchester, and he came up to me afterwards and he was like, I need you to talk to me about what was that? That was so out of my comfort zone. I'd never go watch something like that, but I couldn't. I was transfixed. I couldn't stop watching it. I was like, that's because your archetype is the everyman, and this was an everyman's play. This is the folk theatre. This is the theatre of our land. And although it's recently made up, it still is tapping into what your ancestors would have stood around and watched in your local village green or town square. This was your entertainment before you had films, and he's really into music and he's really into the Stone Roses and stuff because it's Manchester music. And I was like, this is everyman rooted culture, and that's why it spoke to you. It's not fancy opera, or it's not the upper class entertainment. This is working class entertainment. It spoke to him archetypally, even though it didn't make any sense whatsoever and he didn't know what was going on. And so we created this play and we set off from Edinburgh and we walked back down the line and absolutely was tuned into the Belenus energy on the way back down. And it was, again, this sovereignty. It's amazing what can happen and what unfolds with these journeys. And we learnt so much. Alan Watts talks about the universal play. He suggests exploring this mind game where you begin by imagining that you're able to control your dreams every night. And so every night you go to bed and you can do whatever you want. And so you're like, you can fly, you can have sex with whoever you want, you can eat whatever you want, you can go anywhere you want, you can do anything you want, you can live anywhere, you can have your dream home, like whatever it is that you want to imagine, you can have it. And so you do that for ages and ages, having a great old time. But then after a while, it starts to get a bit boring. Just being able to have whatever you want is a bit dull. You realise that what you want is a bit of a challenge. You're not always going to get what you want. So you like to put a few perilous bits in there. It starts to get more exciting when there's change and surprise. You're not always going to get what you want. You keep adding these in and then you get really addicted to it. It's almost like an adrenaline rush. You have even suffering, proper peril, dangerous situations, and real foe to fight with. You create all these incredible situations and scenarios, increasingly detailed, and then one day you create the concept of a big red button that if you push it, you will actually give up full control. And if you give up full control, you, within this dream, are going to take away the power to wake up whenever you want, which up until this moment you've had. Not only that, but you're not going to remember that you've done this. And that red button's there, and you, for a few dreams, for quite a while, are like, I'm not doing it. I'm not pushing that button. I'm not pushing that button. But one day you will push that button, and you will wake up in the life that you live now. And that is the possibility of what we're in. In that place, we are all one. We are this being with fingers in lots of finger puppets, entertaining itself. It's one universe, having a multifaceted entertainment experience, dream, and we're all playing these parts. When I do the Which Fool Are You training, it's about recognizing what your facet is on this jewel. You're an individual, but you're an individual facet on an inner divine jewel of which we are all part. You can see all the other facets through yours. When you look through it, it is see-through and you can see everything through it, and that's why you can play all of the parts and empathize, stand in the shoes of every part, because you have all of them within you. But you are here playing a particular part yourself. That is for us to know better and understand and own it. And it's giving yourself permission. And that's the sovereignty, sitting back in your throne and seat of power as your facet, owning the space that you are, fully standing in that. When we did this pilgrimage down the spine of Albion, I think we all really felt that so much and felt what a privilege and honour it was to be in our bodies and on earth having this experience. We pressed that red button. We're here for a really short time and we're here experiencing this life, and it comes with all the stuff that it comes with. But that's what we're here to do. We're here to experience it. We're here to live it, and we're here to be part of it. And there's nothing to do other than be here. That's all there is. That's all we're meant to be doing, is we're just meant to be here experiencing it and participating, sitting in our throne of power, being our part and just doing it, getting on with it. How can you be of service? How can you serve the bigger picture by being of service to your whole body, to your whole being, and to the world around you, and to meet everyone from this place of unity and oneness, even when they're an annoying asshole, to be able to have compassion for them because they're playing that part, not you get to play your part. They're having to play that. Trump's having to play Trump. Like, he gets to sit on a gold toilet, but he also has to be Trump. I can just about afford toilet roll, but I get to be me, and I would much rather be me. So I'm glad that he's doing that, and he creates a really good bad fairy. And there's people on the island as well that I have difficulties with who make really good bad fairies. They're really good at it, and they're really annoying, and I want to throttle them, but at the same time I don't have to be them, and that's great. I get to be me, and I'm really pleased about that. And some of them are rich. I wouldn't swap all the money in the world for being you. You keep all of that. I will very happily clean the toilets at the Mermaid and crack on with being me and sitting in my throne of power and wearing my crown on my head and being my sovereign in my reality, because I love what I have been born into. I love this experience of life. And so it's claiming your sovereignty and being of service, being loving and compassionate and not being a tyrant. When we did the pilgrimage back along the Michael line, or the group of people, we did the George and the Dragon play, during that time we had 3 prime ministers and 2 sovereigns during that one walk. That all happened in one walk. And that was crazy. When we walked back down the spine of Albion, we had a new sovereign, and the coronation was happening that year. Stepping into all of that, it is actually a fascinating subject, and it does really link to Aries and this moment that we're in. It's worth reflecting on because there's a lot of Aries stuff that's going to be going on for a while. So we're in Aries season now. We've just had an Aries eclipse, but that's the end of a chapter of eclipses in Aries and Libra that have been for the last 18 months. That's been about you looking at and experiencing your own sovereignty, your own power, your drive, your action, your leadership, but then also in reflection to the Libra, which is about judgment and equality and fairness and collective justice. And we can see it's been playing out a lot in the world. We've also had Venus going through Aries, retrograding through Aries, Mars retrograding through Aries, Mercury retrograding through Aries, all of this stuff happening in Aries, all at the time that Trump's been doing all of his stuff. Very on point with what's happening in the world. And also reflection of the last time Venus was retrograde, which was the last time Trump got in. So it's like absolute parallel thing happening. It was almost like that was a test run for the real deal, which is the one we've got now. We also have a huge thing happening today, which I'm recording on the 30th of March, the day Neptune moves into Aries. Although we've just closed the chapter with the solar eclipses, and lunar, the eclipse season, that's a test run of us figuring out how we feel about our sovereignty and power, closing that door. And now we're going to have 16 years of Neptune in Aries. Neptune is the planet of illusion and dream and kind of fantasy. It's been in Pisces for the last 16 years. In that time, we've seen the rise of witchcraft, esotericism, mental health, neurodivergent things, and identity. Pisces is very fluid, floaty, and spiritual. So how we inner identify, and that's been in the last 16 years. Now we're in this next 16 years, which is really about political action and, standing up for what we care about. It doesn't necessarily have to be aggressive or violent at all, although that could and possibly is going to be manifesting. It's how to sit in your sovereignty and be strong, boundary clear, defiant, and of service from a place of power, from your seat of power. Such a incredible thing to be observing what's going on in the stars and then how it's manifesting in the world. It's worth us checking in with it because there's a lot going on. And I always say with all these things, it's all with a pinch of salt. It's not that I say all of it's true. I think they're useful blueprints and useful things to contemplate. I hadn't contemplated sovereignty until having these experiences through pilgrimage, reflecting on it through tarot and astrology. I've personally gained a lot from considering my sovereignty, my power, and my highest self, the highest version of myself. I need to know that I have this crown on my head and have the power and the right to fight for the things that I believe in. I need to know that I've got the warrior, the power, the strength, the emperor, the queen. I want to know that I've got it because I need it moving forwards in the world that we live in today. If you enjoy this podcast, then please consider supporting me on Patreon, which is patreon.com/Jolie Rose. It's your way of being a patron to the arts and supporting an artist to make a living. And I know that times are hard, so if you can't afford it, then that is okay, because someone who can is paying for me to do this, helping me to do this. It means that you get a free podcast. So everyone gets to experience this work, and it's only if you can afford it that you're contributing. And that seems like a really nice, fair way to do things. I love putting out free content. I do the moon ceremonies for free and make video blogs and do fortnightly articles for the Guernsey Press. I mean that people are able to hear and receive the transmissions or musings that I have about the stars and the tarot. It's all for free. Those who can afford it show their appreciation by supporting me, which means that I can live and pay for the internet and all the things I need to make this happen. So if you can afford it, even if it's just a few pound a month, for £3 a month, you help so much. Every pound really does help, especially in this day and age. And those who can pay a bit more, for £9 a month, get to see the video of the recordings as well. Whatever you're able to do, very much appreciated. And some other offerings that I've got coming up is the Beltane Festival, which is on Saturday the 3rd of May, and that's over here in Sark. The bluebells are out, spring has sprung, and it's the most incredible day. We burn a wicker man, we dance the maypole, we have the Morris, we have Mama's Plays, we have loads of incredible bands. So if you fancy coming along, tickets are only £35 for the day. Come and have an amazing experience here in Sark at the most beautiful time of year. We also have the Secret Kooky Tea Club night that my friend Joni set up when she discovered that not drinking really enhanced her life, but also that it's harder to maybe meet people and chat and socialise without alcohol being the central theme. Each month there's a secret guest. You don't know who it is because it's not about that. It's about you hearing about different things, a subject you maybe have no idea about or interested in normally, and you're hearing for the first time all about this person's world and what they do and why they do it. And then there's an incredible chef every time. He makes delicious food, like a sort of high tea meal, or an array of delicious alcohol-free cocktails. You can bring booze if you want to, but if you don't drink, there's all this wonderful stuff being put on for you. It sparks conversation and people sit around chatting, and it's just a delicious night. It's decadent and absolutely, I love it. It's divine. So you can get tickets to that for April, and it'll be April the 24th, and that's for people who live in Guernsey. You could go over from Sark if you want, but it's not for UK unless you're extremely eager to come along. I mean, you're very welcome if you want to. But something that is available to everybody is the Which Fool Are You course, which starts at the end of May. And this is the deep dive that I do, going into the archetype and working out what your archetype is and finding a way to tune in with it and develop a relationship with it so that it's not running you and you are a priestess or a priest in service of it. And the word for me is permission. It's giving yourself permission to live and breathe and be that archetype. Own the character that you were sent here to play. When you press that big red button, you stepped into this world as this being and forgot everything. So this is us remembering and noticing our own blind spot and seeing what we are, what we represent, and being like, yeah, all right, cool, I'm going to play that, and I'm going to play it with gumption and to just fully own it. And it's wonderful. It's the deepest work I've ever done. I love it. I love every year I dive in again, and it's my favourite thing that I do. So that's going to be starting the end of May. Email is in the show notes, and get in touch with me if you've got any interest in that. Now on with the show. Ah, cool. Okay. This is Geoff, which is a spiritual gift. It's like an X. It's an X. And this is about the twin, which is about the sovereignty and the twin. So it's a spiritual gift. And what I was talking about at the Aries dark moon ceremony that was last night, this relationship between the inner and outer world, the cross, the point in the middle of this cross between these two lines is the sphincter. And the sphincter is our ego. It's our body and our ego. The universe is infinite outwardly, and it's the infinite universe, and it's the cosmos, the Milky Way, our solar system, the planet Earth, the country you live in, your town or village, your house, your bedroom, your clothes, your body, and then it goes up your sphincter. It's how you're feeling right now, your general disposition, how your relationships are, what's happening with you and your family, your partner, ancestral history, and then your culture, your imagination, dreaming, archetypes, and collective consciousness, and then that all becomes one. And the inner world is infinite and the outer world is infinite, but there's only one infinity. So these infinities join up, and the sphincter is this place where the twist is. In more traditional indigenous cultures, that twist doesn't exist. That figure of 8, which is the symbol of infinity, which is what this cross is in the middle, if you untwist that, it would make a circle. And the circle is the Fool. The Fool is the top of the tarot deck. It's the 0 card at the top of the tarot deck. The Fool is when that twist is untwisted. Duende, and this moment where you're lost in flow and you're completely lost to the dance of flamenco, is when you've untwisted that twist and your inner and outer are one. And that's what we're always looking for as performers. It's those moments of bliss when you're giving birth. If you are able to give birth naturally and just lose yourself and actually surrender, that twist untwists and you open up and you become this portal for life to come through. It happens in many situations, but it's almost like this is the real gold. The saying's money can't buy you love, or money can't buy you duende. That is something that you have to just be in the right space for, and it's free. It's the real gold. Like, that's the real gold. And so this rune represents a spiritual gift, moments of duende in your life, these moments of connection, but also that because we forget that the inner and outer world are one, we forget that they are influencing each other. So our words do create our world, create or be created. It's always been the case that our words create our world, but we lived in a reality that was created for us with a narrative. And there was the grand narrative previously, which was religion and hierarchy, serfdom. At one point we had the fiefdom, and then that became democracy, but that was the grand narrative. And then with the war, we got modernism and postmodernism, where we stopped trusting these narratives so much and they began to dissolve. Now we've got to the point where we can hardly trust anything. With AI, fake news, and all the nonsense going on in the world, it's highlighting that it is all made up, and that a reality people would fight and kill for was as true to the Crusaders as it is to Islam, as it is to the people watching their loved ones being burnt at the Ganges in India right this second, as it is to the Tudors burning a witch, as it is to the Neolithic people having a shaman ceremony in a cave and painting ox on the wall. And whatever reality we've ever lived in has been real, and we've fully believed in it, and it's been so real, and people have killed over it, and yet they're all completely different. We used to go out on a Sunday and watch a hanging, or you'd go to watch the Christians being eaten by lions, or you now go watch the football. All of them are reality. But if we dropped into any of these other realities, they would seem like absolute insanity. This is all a made up play. It's the universal play, and it is made up. Laws are made up. Ownership of land is made up. Titles of Lord and Lady are made up. King and Queen are titles that are made up. President of America is made up. So at any point we can change these narratives. Our words are spells, and we're spelling this reality into being. And it's a number 9 year in numerology. And that is very much a frequency creating with our words. It's a really metaphorical energy. And so it's a really good year for mood boards and just anything that will program things into your brain and tweak our brain into opening up to the possibilities of what it can create. And also we have Pluto in Aquarius now, and Aquarius is an air sign. So even more so, our words are creating our reality. The energies of the cosmos are supporting us in this power that we've always had, but now more than ever, it's not just possible, but also imperative, because the narratives are breaking down. So we need to write new ones, because there's a very established one, is that we're all fucked. Now, you can go with that if you want, but what does that equal? That equals being fucked. So if you don't want to be fucked, you need to write some other narrative. You need to get creative and come up with something else. And the other thing to do with this spiritual gift is that the outer world is a sign language for the inner world. So if you pulled this in a reading, it would suggest that there is going to be some kind of message that indicates to you what you really need, like your path. So the route to Duende is being presented to you through a job opportunity, something a person says, or a bird that you're like, oh, I always associate robins with Grandad, and oh, Robin's just appeared and is on that path over there. Maybe I should follow that path and just go for a walk. And whilst having that walk, you decide it's time to move house, or it's time to split up with that partner, or whatever it is, to follow the signs, to look out for the signs and the omens, and be open to the sign language that is coming to you from the outer world. And so that's what that is also suggesting. And to do that all the time. Like, the outer world is a sign language. If you want to know what your inner world's like, first of all, you could do the Which Fall Are You course. Second of all, is look at who are you attracting? I know lots of people who are like, oh my God, I have all these amazing people in my life and they inspire me so much and they're so incredible. The reason why they're in your life is because you're like that too. If you're surrounded by incredible, inspiring, vivacious people, it's because you've created that. You're giving out an energy that draws that into your life, and you're orchestrating that. I know so many people who don't realise that they don't realise that they are surrounded by those people because those people are their inner world. That's their inner world. And you might be projecting onto them that they're something that you like. Comparison is the thief of joy. You might be projecting onto them things that you feel are unachievable, but actually they're not your projections. They are people who feel like imposters or worry that they're not good enough. There are all sorts of other things that you don't see. You only see the projection that you're projecting onto them, and your projection is going to be amazing. And that you created. So to take that back, and that's the twin effect. This is the whole twin effect that we're always working with. We're always projecting out and believing that to be real, but it's our play that we're projecting out there of our inner world. So that's what that room means. Interesting. Yeah, that's all I've got to say on that. So last of all, we've got the Chaos Crusade. And the Chaos Crusade for you this week is to hold your own coronation. Now, you might have done this if you were with me on the Dark Moon ceremony, in which case you can have a week off. No, I think you should spend some time wearing your crown out and about. That's what I think you should do. If you didn't do the ceremony with me, then I would like to invite you to create your own coronation ceremony. First of all, you need to make a crown. And I think everyone should have a crown. I have a crown. It's on a pirate hat. I'm very fond of my crown. I was working at the pub the other day and one of the women on the island said to me, oh, nice tiara. I was like, it's a crown, actually. And she did this face. And it's the sort of face you'd put at a child if a child had said it. But I think she was a bit affronted by the fact that I'd said it as well. But I was just like, it's not a fucking tiara, love. It's a crown. It was one of those moments where I could have been like not sat in my if I wasn't feeling my throne of power, if I didn't feel sovereign of my power, I would have probably not even said anything. Like, oh, I like your tiara, and I've been like, oh, thanks, but I wasn't gonna. It's not a tiara. I'm not a princess. I'm a queen. I think it's important for us to connect with this part of ourselves because I'm not going to wear a tiara. So for your coronation, first of all, make a crown. You can have a tiara if you want. That's up to you. But for me personally, I want a crown. And for the ceremony, you will want some salt for the earth, some smoking incense for the air, a candle for the fire, and some water for the water. You sit in a space, cast a circle around you to feel like you're in a protective space. You need to have some lovely smelling, nice oil, but one massage oil, something you can massage yourself with, and a white robe, but also some fabulous clothes underneath. You want your coronation outfit with your crown and a white robe that you put around yourself. And you're not wearing the crown initially, obviously, because you're going to crown yourself for the coronation. So you begin the coronation by connecting in, first of all, with what you feel like you're here for, what you care about, and what your pledge is. You spend time writing your pledge and what your pledge is to the people and to the land, what you want to be, how you want to be of service. Spend some time connecting with that. And then taking each of the elements, connecting with each of those elements in terms of what you're pledging. So the earth, I'm going to physically do this with my body, in honour of my body, and outwardly in the world. Then the air is, this is how I want to communicate. These are the ideas that I want to explore. And your fire is your passion, your drive, the things that you'll die for, that you want to fight for, that you care about, the things that are your combustion engine. And then the water is your inner world, your emotions, your dreaming, your imagination, and creativity. And then once you've done that with all four, You then anoint yourself, and this is a moment of humility. As you're doing this is when you're shedding the small version of yourself and stepping into the higher version of yourself. That's not from a place of ego, it's from a place of surrender. You're surrendering to something bigger and allowing that in and honouring that part of yourself. And then you take the crown and you say the pledge again, the pledge that you're making to yourself and to the world. You place that crown upon your head. And then have a nice little feast to celebrate. And then you cut the circle, maybe go out and wear your crown for a day and see how it feels. It's a wonderful thing to do. I really enjoy doing it. I loved wearing my crown at work the other day. It's one of my favourite things to do. So connecting in with your sovereignty, you are a sovereign and you are meant to be here. You were born for this. So crack on. You've got this. And enjoy. So thank you, my loves, and I shall see thee anon.